has to be said. I mean, anything that Elon Musk says or does causes a massive stir. This, more than anything, as pretty much the whole of the Twitter liberati, the wokerati, have completely lost their collective minds over the horror of a multi-billionaire owning a social media site. I guess they just haven't heard of Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's almost worth 45 billion just to see the meltdown amongst all the people who are really upset about this. It's ridiculous. We lots of social media companies, as you say, are already owned by billionaires. Twitter wasn't exactly a democracy. It wasn't owned by the US state before Elon Musk bought it. People are reacting as if it's an affront to democracy that one man could exercise such power. But yeah, I mean, that's capitalism for you. And actually, I think this is a good example of capitalism working as it should. You know, people have been complaining that all the big tech companies are owned by people with just one political point of view. They are, without exception, until now, left of centre, and have been, you know, fairly energetic about enforcing a woke orthodoxy.
Well, indeed. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, it's fascinating. When we had people like Donald Trump, then the sitting president of the United States had already lost the election. And yes, whatever he says to Piers Morgan on talkTV, Donald Trump, you did lose that election. But he was booted off Twitter and or every other social media platform. And even while he was a democratically elected president, still at that point, and the left and the so-called liberals were cheering this on, quite happy about it. There has been an awful lot of censorship, and censorship not just of politicians we don't like or don't agree with, but people who, you know, have been like you and me, people opposed to lockdown, people who question the idea that we're entering a climate emergency, lots of other big issues, and issues, the trans debate as well, people losing their Twitter handles. And the claim has always been from the left, the liberals, the wokerati, is, well, if you don't like it, go and set up your own social media platform. Them's the rules, and you have to play along with them. But now they don't seem to be so happy with, as you say, a billionaire setting the rules.
Yes, well, it's not surprising. You know, they claim to be in favour of the rules until the rules no longer favour them, and then they want to change them. Yeah, but I think that one of the things I hope Twitter will do, now that it's owned by Elon Musk, is urgently review all those people that have been banned over the past 5 years or so, and see if there's any political bias in those decisions. And I think they should grant an amnesty to all of those people and say, look, you know, we're going to give you a buy, and these are the rules from now on, and if you break them, you may be banned, but until you do that, you can be reinstated. I also think they need to review their algorithms. At the moment, Twitter's algorithms, which automatically censor people, some users who post on Twitter, are opaque. No one knows what's in them apart from the people that work at Twitter. And Elon Musk has said that he's going to publish them and have an open source review of them, which is great. They also need to review, they do need to do an audit of their fact-checking department. As you say, so many people have been suspended from the platform or permanently banned just for challenging the prevailing COVID orthodoxy.
I mean, people like Professor Carl Hennigan, Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at Oxford University, having tweets censored because they don't, you say, agree with the orthodoxy. But again, the orthodoxy in 1 year or 1 month will be very different from what it is a year later. Even like, you know, where did the coronavirus come from? Was it possibly the Wuhan lab, or was it from a wet market? 1 year, unacceptable to say that on Twitter. The next year, after Joe Biden has said it, completely acceptable.
Well, the idea that if you challenge the prevailing scientific consensus, you should be censored and no platformed, is completely counter to the spirit of science. Science progresses as it's challenged and tries to respond to those challenges. You know, I hope that one of the things Elon Musk does is seriously consider making Carl Hennigan's Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine part of the fact-checking setup. Twitter, because that would be
That would be very good, wouldn't it? But this is the thing. A lot of people would say, well, who cares? I mean, it's social media. It's a load of people posting a load of nonsense. But it's very different from Instagram, isn't it? Where people are sort of, as far as I can tell, just posting pictures of... I'm always amazed by women who can show in a picture their face, their breasts and their bottom at the same time. I say all credit to them for being able to do that. I'm not sure I could do that at this age. But it's all... Here's where I am on holiday. Twitter, though, is very different. It's very, very political. I mean, Facebook is pretty political as well, certainly around election time. But this is now, to all intents and purposes, the public square. This is where news on Ukraine war comes out first. It's where major announcements on policies come out first. Boris Johnson makes a statement. We found out about Partygate fines. This is where the public debate is happening. And it needs to be somewhere that everyone can take part in. But can we trust that Elon Musk? He has said repeatedly, he says free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy, and he wants to protect free speech on Twitter. Can we trust him, though, or is it, as is often the case, his version of free speech?
Well, it's hard to imagine that he'll do a worse job and adhere less faithfully to the principles of free speech than the people who've been running Twitter for the last 10 years. Of course, I'm sure he'll get some things wrong, and there'll be people who are kicked off the platform who shouldn't deserve to be kicked off the platform, but at least he's going to try, I think, and get it right. And I think his argument, which is Twitter has become the de facto public square, and in a democracy it's important that debate should be able to take place between people of wildly different opposing views without any of them risking being cancelled or kicked off the platform for expressing themselves honestly. I think that's a really important principle, and I think a really good argument. And I think we need to give him the benefit of the doubt and see how he gets on. I mean, and I think it's really refreshing and a source of huge optimism if you're a pro-free speecher, as we are, Julia, that someone who clearly does believe in free speech and thinks it's important that it should be a governing principle of Twitter now owns the platform.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll all agree that people who make threats to kill or abuse, we need to have some rules of engagement. It can't be a complete free-for-all. It'd be an unpleasant platform to be on otherwise. But largely it should be, if you commit a criminal offence, you're off, rather than someone deciding they don't like something you've said, whether it's about, your views on whether women include trans women as a group, whether things, really simple debates like that, or whether lockdown policy or vaccine policy is appropriate. We need to know what the rules of engagement are.
That's right, and they need to be enforced consistently. I mean, I think it's all very well for Twitter to make the argument that it banned Donald Trump because he was inciting people to commit violence. You can make that argument, and I think that is a good limit that should be placed on free speech. People who set out to incite violence should be no platformed. But the really unfair thing, I think, about banning Trump is that Trump was banned, but other people who don't merely incite violence, but who run states that regularly commit violence, like Putin, the leader of the Taliban, they weren't kicked off the platform. Yeah. So if you're going to have these rules, you have to enforce them consistently and not just apply them to one side of the argument.